Hi students, today we are working on Unit 13 or Topic 13, Lesson 2, and we are going to be talking about finding the area of other shapes or shapes other than rectangles. And today specifically we're focusing on triangles. So we're going to begin in our launch and we are going to go ahead and attempt this problem, but I'd like you to attempt it in your companion book and then come back and we can work through it together. All right, so if we're looking at this problem, we know that the school is going to be restoring a lot of land. That just means a section of land. And we see that they have this rectangular section, but that they're going to cut it diagonally, and they're going to do one half of it the garden, one half of it's going to be a mini forest. So what we need to figure out is the area of this rectangle, which we learned last time, and we need to be careful about the measurements here because it tells us that this whole grid that we're looking at, that this little miniature grid is plotted on, the whole grid is 100 feet by 100 feet. So that means each one of these squares represents something other than one. So what I need to do to figure it out is I need to count how many squares there are. So I'm going to do that first. So I'm going to say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so if 10 squares of the same length are put together to make 100, that means each of these squares represents 10 feet. So altogether, 10 10-foot squares make 100 feet. So now that I know that each square is 10 feet, I'm going to say, okay, well, how long is this garden, or I'm sorry, is this plot of land right here? So I'm going to say, well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. Each section is 10 feet. So this is 40 feet long. And then let's see how tall it is. It's 1, 2, 3 sections tall. 3 10-foot sections is 30 feet. All right, so this one was 40 and this one is 30. So I know that this whole rectangle, I can find the area of the whole rectangle by doing length times width, or base times height, however you would like to think about that. So I can do 40 times 30. Well, 4 times 3 is 12. And then I have two zeros, one from the 40 and one from the 30. So I know that this is 1200. So the whole thing is 1200. But if I'm going to cut this in half, I can then find out what half of 1200 is. Well, I'm going to cross out the 1200 because now I need half of it. Half of 1200 is 600. So I can say, okay, well, the garden side will be 600 square feet and the mini forest will be 600 square feet. And now we have our answer. Let's go ahead and pull up the solution page so you can take a look if you'd like to. Pause the video here if you would like to take a look at this a little bit longer. Now for this next part, we're going to jump into part 1. What I'd like you to do is to go find a blank piece of paper, probably a blank piece of printer paper or a blank piece of lined paper. Even graph paper will work. Most paper is automatically 8.5 by 11, so if you can, try to make it get an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. And we're going to do this activity digitally, but I'd also like you to follow along with your blank piece of paper. So if you have your blank rectangular piece of paper, it's going to look like this. What I'd like you to do is very, very carefully see if you can fold it perfectly one time so that you get a diagonal across the center, a diagonal line just across the center, and fold it right there. So go ahead and pause the video now and do that if you need to. Otherwise, you can follow along with what we're doing on the screen. So in this example, they're telling us that a sheet of paper has dimensions of 8.5 or 8.5 by 11 inches. And it's saying a diagonal forms two matching triangles. I didn't draw mine perfectly, but this side and this side would be the same triangle on both sides. So they're saying, what is the area of one of the triangular sections? So just one of the sections, not both. So what we need to do is say, well, we know how to find the area of the whole rectangle. That would be 11 times 8.5. And we can go ahead and do that And then we can say, well, we only need half of it. So then we can do this math, and then we can, whatever our answer is, we can divide it by 2. Or divide, depending on how you're thinking about this, divide it by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my calculator here to do 11 times 8.5, which is, here it is, 11 times 8.5 is 93.5. So I have 93.5 is the area of my whole rectangle. But remember, I cut it in half, or the paper that you have with you, you cut in half. We'll need to find half of it. So if we need to find half of 93.5, we need to divide that by 2. So I'm going to do this just by long division here. So let me erase this piece down here. All right, so I need to divide 93.5 by 2. 2 goes into 9 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. 9 take away 8 is 1. Bring down the 3. 2 goes into 13 6 times. I'm going to throw that decimal up here before I forget. 6 times 2 is 12. 13 take away 12 is 1. Bring down that 5. 2 goes into 15 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. And I know you can't see this right now, but 15 take away 14 is 1. I'm going to need a placeholder, so I'm going to bring this placeholder down to my 1. So now I have 10. 2 goes into 10 5 times evenly. So my answer is 46.75. But remember, I'm finding the area. And whenever you're finding the area, you're working in square inches. How many pieces of square paper that are 1 inch by 1 inch could fit on that triangle? It would be 46.75. So now I'd like you to try the same idea in your student companion book. Go ahead and try the got it, and then come back here for the answer. If you're ready for the answer, some of our answer choices could have been A, B, C, or D. Hopefully you see your answer on there. And remember, you might have written this as a decimal. So if your whole number is the same, let's go ahead and check the whole number first, and then we'll look at the decimal. All right, so if you got 12 1/4 or 12.25 square inches, you are correct. So you would do 3.5 times 7, and you would get 24.5. And then you would take half of that, and you would get 12.25 or 12 1/4. Here's the solution if you'd like to look at that. They left theirs in fraction form, which is totally fine, but we could do it in whole number form. And now we have our answer. So you might be wondering, wait a minute, I thought this lesson was supposed to be on area of triangles. Well, if you've noticed, we have been finding the area of triangles, but we've been doing it by making a rectangle, or by first thinking about it as a rectangle. So the rule about triangles is that any two triangles can be, you can make a copy of them, and you can put them together to make a rectangle. You can try it. You can make any triangle at your house, cut it out, and then make an exact copy of it, and you'll be able to make a rectangle and or a square. But either way, you'll be able to make a four-sided shape, and you'll be able to find the area of that shape. And then if you wanted to find the area of the triangle, you would just need to take half of the area of the rectangle. Let's go ahead and watch this video about how we can compose or join two triangles to make a rectangle.
Suppose you have a right triangle with base B and height h. To compose a rectangle, first make a copy of the right triangle. Rotate the copy, and then push the triangles together to form a rectangle. So you can use a right triangle to compose a rectangle with the same base and height as the right triangle.
So now we're asked to find the area of the right triangle shown below. So again, we need to picture this as a rectangle. So let me draw this as a rectangle. If we were kind of going to picture this as a rectangle, we would need to do 5 times 8 and then take half of it. Well, what is 5 times 8? 5 times 8 is 40, and now I need to take half of it. 40 divided by 2 is 20. So the area is 20 meters squared or square meters. Let's go ahead and try the got it. Try the got it on your own and then come back to check your answer. Hopefully you had time to try the got it. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the solution. We needed to picture this as a rectangle, so we're going to do 4.5 times 6 to find the area of the rectangle. Then we're going to take half of it, and half of 27 is 13.5. So our area of that garden bed was 13.5. So by now you may be wondering, well, wait a minute, why do I have to think of triangles as rectangles every single time? Now is the part where we're going to learn that you don't necessarily have to think about it, but it's really helpful to memorize the formula for finding the area of a triangle. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look. When we're looking at the formula for the area of a right triangle, actually any triangle, we're thinking about how that triangle could fit together with the same copy of the triangle to make a rectangle. And the way that we're going to do that is by knowing the base and the height of the triangle, thinking about it as a rectangle, but then at the very end we're going to jump to, well, now we just have the formula for a right triangle or for a triangle.
The base of a triangle is any side of the triangle.
Oh, okay. So the base of a triangle is any side of the triangle. All right. Typically, when we're working with a triangle, and it has a right angle, I like to choose one of the sides that's on the right angle, and I'll show you why later. But for now, if this is making an L, it kind of makes an L here, choose one of the legs of the L. This part right here, this really long side in a triangle, is actually called the hypotenuse. And in right triangles, it's not helpful if you choose this one as your base. You technically can, but I like to use one of the legs of the L. So use that as the base. Now we're going to look at the height. The height is the other leg. So first we looked at the base, which was one of the legs. The height is the other leg of the triangle. And again, when you're working with a right triangle, it's helpful to not choose the really long side, this hypotenuse. And like we've seen before, we've pictured this as a triangle or as a rectangle where we've been able to say, okay, well, height times base divided by 2 is going to give us, or half of the rectangle is going to give us the triangle. Well, guess what? That's exactly the formula for a triangle. It's half of the base times the height. Or you can say base times height divided by 2. Both of these are going to work and give you the area of the triangle. The one I prefer is base times height divided by 2, because sometimes when you see this fraction, it's a little scary to think of like, oh, I've got to use a fraction with my formula. No, just remember you're taking half of it. So it's half of the base times the height, or base times height divided by 2. So from now on, and in the next lesson when we learn about other types of triangles that aren't right triangles, we're going to be using this formula and this formula only. Base times height divided by 2, or half of base times height. So we're not going to be talking about the rectangles anymore, even though it's still helpful to picture the rectangle in our mind. All right, so in this triangle, they gave us the right triangle right here. And they gave us all 3 measurements. But remember what I just told you. When you have a right triangle, use the one that's part of the L. So here's the L. It's a sloppy little line I'm just drawing here. But use this, one of the legs as your base. We're going to say this is our base. And use one of them as your height. Remember, we don't want to use the hypotenuse as our base or height. And I'll tell you why soon. So for now, let's do the formula. Base times height divided by 2. 5 times 12, well, that's 60. And 60 divided by 2 is 30. 60 divided by 2 is 30. So this would be 30 square centimeters. Now I'd like you to go in your book and try your got it. All right, remember we need to use the legs on the L. So we do 8 times 6 is 48, divided by 2 is 24. So we have 24 square feet. Go ahead and complete your close and check, and then come on back for the answers. All right, students, here are the answers to check your work.